Well, welcome to the latest episode of the Northern Leaders Podcast, the podcast that shines a light on the people who make the North a better place. Our guest today is somebody that I've known for a long time, Gavin Wheeldon. He's the CEO of a company called Purple, but he's been an entrepreneur all his life. He first showed his entrepreneurial flair that I'm aware of at the age of 11. He went on to appear on Dragon's Den, famously offering the smallest amount of equity for the most money. We'll be talking to him about that as well. He then went to appear on The Secret Millionaire. Now, his first proper business was called the Applied Language Solutions, and it was sold for reported £67.5 million to Capita. But he could have stopped working, but he didn't, like so many entrepreneurs. He founded his next business, his current business, called Purple. Massive family man. He's helps and supports lots of people behind the scenes. That's what makes him a great Northern leader. He loves gadgets. He used to write a column for Business Cloud called Gadget Gavin that was very popular as well. I know he likes cooking as well. He's a top guy. Really looking forward to speaking to him, finding out what makes him tick. But before then, a quick word with our sponsors. This episode of Northern Leaders Podcast is sponsored by Sancus UK, which is a real estate lender based in Manchester. Sancus UK is part of the wider Sancus Lending Group, which has offices in London, Jersey and Dublin. They specialise in short-term lending solutions to support their clients' purchase and refinance requirements, including development funding for SME house builders, as well as investors specialising in residential and commercial assets. Their ethos is simple, and that's to deliver straightforward financing for their clients, which ensures they stand out from the crowd. That's Sancus UK, standing out from the crowd. Well, welcome back to the latest episode of the Northern Leaders Podcast with our special guest, Gavin Lloyd Wheeldon. Now, don't tell me the background to the Lloyd story yet, because I know it's worth waiting for, but we always start the podcast with two questions. And the first one is, what does the North mean to you?
Well, I've grown up here, and I guess it's identity. It's been a part of a culture, a movement, and I think the North is almost the underdog of the UK that's come out swinging, I think, and particularly in the tech scene as well. You know, yeah, there's more in London, but, you know, Manchester and other parts of the North have got an incredibly thriving tech scene now, which is fantastic.
And the North for you, I mean, we've got an audience today, and you know, there's like
the audience.
It's like the Oldham has come into the podcast studio today. So what is North for you?
Well, actually, pretty much all of my family are from Salford, but my mum and dad, well, my dad in particular, are a bit more nomadic. So I've lived in Sale and Rochdale and Middleton.
Well, they went a long way then.
Well, in fairness, in Africa and Canada and Leicester as well. But I'm talking just around this sort of area. And we settled for a few years in Mosley in Tameside, which is just on the border of Oldham, which is why I ended up crossing the border.
One of the questions I'm going to ask later is your nomadic education, because you change schools a lot, and that explains it. The second question I ask is, what is leadership to you? How do you define leadership?
That's a big question, isn't it? I think it's inspiring people to follow. It's getting people to see the purpose, see it's more than a daily job, and enjoy what they do. You know, I've always said, if somebody gets up in the morning, this includes me, and doesn't want to dash to work, then you failed. You know, and it's either the wrong place for them. You know, so culturally sometimes it is, and people need to move on. But yeah, it's about creating inspiration and people want to follow.
I want people to learn stuff about you that they've not found out or didn't know anywhere else. Right, okay. So Gavin Wheeldon is your name. Yeah. Okay. I hadn't realised until I looked at Company's House, your middle name is Lloyd.
Yes.
Okay. Where did that name come from?
So, my mum and dad being very, very organised, never last minute, on the way to the christening, still hadn't decided on a middle name, and they needed to stop for money. So you can probably put two and two together and figure out which bank.
Lloyd.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, so it could have been a lot worse, couldn't it?
Barclays, Santander.
Gavin, Santander, Wheeldon. I think you sound like a porn star there. But so let's talk about your journey, okay? And before we talk about your entrepreneurial journey, just describe what your childhood was like. I mean, you mentioned before it's fairly nomadic in the sense that your parents moved around a bit, but what was your early childhood like?
Well, yes, I think a big part was the moving about. I was
Why
born
was
in-
that? Were you dad in the army or?
And he wasn't. He was a miner, and he moved around. But I
As
don't
was
think
my
that was the
dad.
reason.
Yeah.
He went to Leicester. I was born there, worked there. We went to Canada, and he was working on the machines. We came back. We went to South Africa. We came back. So I think he just had itchy feet, and I think all that moving around I certainly helped shape me, because you're thrown into new schools and new environments constantly, and you need to build new networks, new friendships, figure out where you are on the pecking order. And so I think it builds a lot of skills.
But it could also be quite unsettling, I'd imagine.
I think it probably can, and I'm sure for some it might not have been a good experience, but it built resilience, I would say, and adaptability.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of your parents, you say your dad worked as a miner. What did your mum do?
Odds and jobs like cleaning, working behind the bar, just sort of, where she could have earned a bit of money.
So you describe yourself as very proudly working class.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and that's where your values come from as well.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about your entrepreneurial journey as well, because I often wonder where that comes from. Are you born with it, or is it something you pick up with other people or you develop? And at the age of 11, you started buying window locks, chains, and spy holes for 50p. And you were selling them for £5.50 because you fitted them.
Correct.
And that was the key, wasn't it? You weren't just putting a markup and selling them on.
Yeah.
You knew that if you fitted them as well. And were you knocking on doors of
absolutely.
older people?
Yeah. Well, and anybody I could, but yes, it was I wouldn't have known, obviously, then that you're buying something, augmenting it, adding value, and therefore getting the margin. I was buying something cheap, and door to door. Do you want the spy hole fitted? Yes. And I'd hand drill like that, going through the
How
door.
old,
and
you were
fitting.
11 then?
Yeah.
11.
Yeah.
And would you do that after school? Would you do it at the weekends?
After school and weekends.
And did you make, listen, £5.50 is a lot of money when you only pay 50p for something.
And at that age,
yeah. Did you make
a few
much
years
money?
ago?
Yeah. Did you make much money?
I did, and I used to give a fair amount of it to my mum, because she didn't have money so much. So a lot of the money I made would go back obviously into the family pot, if you like.
So in your house, if there's an odd job need doing, does your wife say, Gavin?
Oh no, absolutely not. That is not a skill that carried on in life.
Those days are over.
If there's something technological, absolutely. If it's practical, no.
A guy called Alistair is the odd job man who my wife brings in for everything, because she knows that I can ruin anything. So that's your early foray into entrepreneurship. But then you sort of got the bug a little bit. When you were 14, I love this story. You got a telesales job.
Yes.
And you were selling kitchens at evenings and weekends. But you told your bosses you were 16 because you needed to be at least 16. I don't know if you looked 16. But you found yourself, and I know you're modest, incredibly good at it, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. And so I'd been there maybe 3 months, and and they kept on asking national insurance number, which I didn't have. And then, about 3 months in, they said, we can't pay you on Friday if you don't bring your national insurance number. So I had to come clean at that point. And so I was 14, and they all scrabbled off into the office, because I was the number one salesperson. And about 10 minutes, they come out, and they said, we'll pay you cash.
Yeah.
So I'm like, right.
Okay, we won't name that company. But were you cold calling people to sell them kitchens?
Yes.
Okay, and what's your style? If you were selling me a kitchen now, if you'd been that 14-year-old and I picked up the phone and people don't want to be sold to down the phone, what was your approach?
I think the first thing was to try and disarm you, because the instant reaction is there's somebody going to sell something here. So it's something to distract or so I'd ring up and say, Chris, I am absolutely going to sell you something now.
That's what you'd say?
Yeah, and you're expecting, you go, oh.
Yeah.
And it just diverts your attention from the usual, can you just give me 1 minute of your time? No. Whereas we're just work-wise launching an AI SDR, so it's going to make calls for us. Yeah. And its opening line is, it'll say, hey Chris, I'm Purple's charming bot. Yeah. So I'm a bot. Yeah. And people, maybe I want to listen a bit more. So I think that initial 5 seconds that you've got to grab somebody's attention is the key if you're doing cold calling. You're
seeing now a lot of emails are personalised for things like car insurance renewals and things like that.
Yeah.
Hey Chris, notice it's time for your renewal. If you want to renew, but it's personalised. It's all AI.
Yeah.
I listen to, when I listen to Spotify, I listen to the AI bot who hasn't quite grasped the music I like.
Yeah.
Because keeps playing stuff that I'm not interested in. So we're going to talk AI in a minute. In terms of your education, you touched on it before, your nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
Was, as a child, you lived in 16 places.
Yes.
You went to 7 schools. You had,
I think it was more than that. But
was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that was in a year. You had a pretty poor attendance record. When I interviewed you for the first time, because I read back on my notes, in your final year at school, you attended 10% of the time. Was it like one day a week, or was it like?
No, it was about 20. It was 1 day a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were you clever but just not interested, or were you just so focused on entrepreneurship that you couldn't be bothered?
Yeah, I just wasn't engaged. I was naughty. I've got what I realise now is ADHD.
Yeah.
But back then I was just a naughty little bugger who couldn't sit still and got bored.
Yeah.
So I mean, intelligence-wise, there was no issues, and all the reports are always, would do really well if he turned up to school, or things like that. And since when I left school and and college, I mean, I did 13 assignments in a day to get through the first year, and got distinctions and various things. So that it was just, I couldn't be bothered. It wasn't interesting enough.
We interviewed Matthew Scullion, the chief executive of Matillion, which is Manchester's last unicorn, and his French teacher told him before his GCSE he was going to get an E because he was a little bit belligerent, not in a nasty sense, but they didn't think he was going to do anything. So he went home that day. He worked based on what he thought the question was going to be. Spent the entire evening preparing for it. That one question came up, he got an A. And I said to him, what motivated you? He wasn't like, hey, I got an A. It's because somebody said I was going to get an E. And the other thing that I find interesting speaking to entrepreneurs and speaking to people, in the public eye, is how many of them now, similar my age, that they had undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah.
So did you get formally diagnosed with ADHD later in life?
Oh, yes.
Did you?
Like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
And did that change you at all? Do you just live with it? Do you have medication? How do you deal with ADHD?
The only reason I did it, my eldest daughter got flagged when she was in year 4 or something, and we didn't do anything about it until she was in year 7, and it became a bit apparent. But when she was going down that route, they said it's almost always hereditary.
Yeah. Now,
obviously, my wife looked straight at me as if it's you, it ain't me. And they said, it might help her if you went down the journey with us, because otherwise I wouldn't have bothered. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think I just think that the knowledge of what it is, and some of the superpowers it brings, but also some of the challenges it also brings, is helpful to know.
Very difficult. I've got very similar experiences, not exactly the same, but people say to me, Chris, you've got ADHD. In fact, people with ADHD say to me, you've got ADHD. And I said, probably. I said, but I'm, 50, 52, 53 years of age. What's the point? Yeah. What's the point? It's for me, I don't know if it's a superpower, but other people, I try and dress it up as a positive. So you went to school, you weren't interested really, but you had a real talent for entrepreneurship. And then 2003, you launched a business called Applied Language Solutions, ALS, which we'll call it, which is what it was shortened to, with the help of a second mortgage. You ran a credit card debts of £54,000. Just tell us what that business was doing.
It took the basics of language translation at the time, which would have been, you send a document in one language, you'll get the document back in another. And we did that. But what we did is started to integrate with other systems. So it's quite an archaic business world in the way it operated. Linguists, lovely people, but very traditional in their approach. So we started to do things like integrating with the content management system. So as you wrote a new web page, rather than somebody copying and pasting it out into a document, sending it to translators, coming back and copying and pasting it into the different places, we took the feed of all the HTML or whatever the file types might be, and it became a part of the workflow. So that was a little bit unique in the approach we took.
What we've got a chap who joined us at Business Cloud, Patrick Colleen, whose mother works in the translation service as well. I mean, that area that you picked, I think quite often the most successful businesses are the ones that are in what you describe as unsexy subjects, but what you absolutely need. And you quickly sort of cottoned on something, didn't you? And you got work in courts all over the UK.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, just explain how the business grew.
Yeah, so that was the main sort of language translation business grew and grew. And we ended up doing all of Dell and Yahoo, PayPal, Caterpillar, some of the biggest brands in the world. Professor and 3 doctors and developers doing all of that machine learning part of the business. But then we started doing interpreting, which is equally, if not more, archaic. And I quickly realised, and there wasn't a word for it now then, but that if we built something like an Uber for interpreters, we could drive efficiency. Yeah. So we would know that you were at the health service over there at 10 a.m. and we've got a need at the court at 12:30. So you, rather than bringing somebody else in for that court appointment, we started placing people and systematically, divvying out the jobs. So it all became very programmatic in its approach, which drove massive efficiencies and obviously did upset a few people along the way.
So we've all been in court where the defendant... I've been reporting. I can't speak for you, Gavin, but even though I do know that there was once a police hunt for a man who was drilling holes in people's doors and fitting spy holes. But you might have a defendant who can't speak English, so it's not their first language. You need a translation service that comes in. You phone up, you get a translation service. You streamlined all that, which obviously didn't necessarily win you lots of friends with translators who lost a lot of work. But you grew that business. I mean, in a sense, what you're talking about almost seems like a first version of AI.
The machine translation bit of it absolutely was. Everybody calls it AI now. It's sort of like an overarching term. But there's lots of sort of disciplines that fit under that, and machine learning, is language models. That's what we were doing. The language models that are built now, GPT or Gemini and everything, that was the stuff we were doing. Obviously nowhere near where it's ended up, but that is exactly what we were doing, whatever it's 17, 18 years ago.
So before today's interview, I went on YouTube to remind myself of your appearance on Dragon's Den, which you did while you were running.
There.
Absolutely. You're bloody A's, quite honestly. But that was when you were running ALS. Okay.
Yes.
And you went on there it was 2007, so, in your 30s.
Yeah.
And it was because I know you anyway, and I watched you, and Peter Jones was still on there as well. And you went in and he said, right, I'm asking for £250,000 for 4% of my business. 3%. Was it?
Yeah.
Right, okay. I wasn't watching close enough. Okay. For 3% of your business, which at the time was the lowest amount of equity that was ever offered for the most amount demanded.
Yes.
And literally there was this huge intake of breath, like you take your car to the garage and somebody looks at your engine and says, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went on there, you left empty-handed.
Yes.
A lot of people said it was one of the best pitches ever.
Yeah.
Why did you go on Dragon's Den for?
Well, one, I like the programme and I like a challenge.
Yeah.
But secondly, I figured, well, if I go on and I get the money at something like that valuation, that's not a bad outcome.
Yeah.
If I don't, which I fully expected, then I've got some good PR as long as I didn't make a mess of it, which is obviously a risk. But I was up there for 90 minutes, obviously distill it down, but I got 10 minutes of airtime, 6 million viewers, and ended up with a full chapter in the book called The Perfect Pitch by Gavin Wheeldon.
Yeah.
So not a bad outcome to say it cost me nothing.
And did you, when you got back to work the following day, or when the program was screened, did like the website traffic?
It did, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was like an advert.
Yeah.
And other than me, because every time I speak to you, I remind you about Dragon's Den. Does anybody else come up to you and say Dragon's Den?
Not so much anymore, very occasionally,
Yeah.
but at the time, yes, it happened an awful lot then on trains or on a plane, or it was like, were you on Dragon's Den? I'm like, yes.
Well, I looked at the quote as well from Theo Pathesis, who was on the Dragons at the time, and he said, we're all impressed by the turnover you've created. I'm not quite as impressed by the valuation. I'm going to give you the opportunity of how you arrived at that valuation.
Yeah.
And they really grilled you over the numbers, didn't they?
Did.
As well.
Yes.
Because how much was the business worth then?
That would have been about 6 million, I think. A bit less. Yeah, what was it? About 7.5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you clearly had the last laugh because, and this is my memory serves me correct, because it was a long time ago since you appeared, but I think your turnover grew to circa 10 million when you won £60 million government contract to translate in the English and the Welsh courts. You touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
You got some bad press at the time because you clearly were creating efficiency savings in a fairly archaic business, which meant that you had natural enemies lined up against you as well. What was that like when you, the entrepreneur, suddenly found yourself demonized?
Yeah.
I think you were demonized in the Daily Mail, which I think is a badge of honor.
Yeah, I was well, I had the honor. I think I've actually been in the dock of every court in the land, because the judges kept on bringing me up on contempt to, because they could, and it was like playing with me. But I've walked through picket lines and been spat at, and the Law Gazette, I think I was on the front cover at least 3 times, possibly more. So,
but your northern roots, I've never seen you lose your temper. Maybe you do. But how was that for you? Walking through picket lines, being spat at. That reminds me of my own experiences of my dad. When the miners' strike, happened, and he didn't walk through the pickets, but that's because it was so intimidating. What was it like for you as a 30-something?
I think because I knew it was the right thing, and I'd seen some of the numbers and of what people were being paid, and it was just wrong. And the system was being screwed. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on air.
Of course you are. You said bollocks earlier, so
I missed that. And so that was like, I knew it was the right thing. I knew it was the right thing that we were doing. So I won't say it didn't bother me, because it does a bit, but it never got me down, or because I was just determined to beat it.
Well, Capita brought you, and the figure quoted at the time was £7.5 million. So what was that like for you as a lad from a working class family who, by his own admission, is just a gadget man, a geek? Okay, and suddenly you're bought by Capita for this world life-changing amount of money. What was that like?
Well, I mean, you can imagine it's an incredible feeling, because all of that. You start with all the debts and, building it up, and there's, times throughout that journey where it's dicey, and can I pay the salaries? If, there was the 2008 financial crisis where one of our biggest customers was an insurance company in the US, and they owed us a lot of money, and we never thought we'd get it back. It took 9 months. So all of that, where you're thinking all these years of work, it's just going to crumble. And then that's the bit where it crystallises and goes, now whatever happens, I'll be all right. And the family will be all right. So that, is an incredibly liberating, or, freedom.
But it wasn't about the money though, was it?
No.
That wasn't your driving force?
No. I think if money's ever the driving force, then you're probably not going to do that well in life, I don't think. You need to love the journey. And tech is what I love. So, the fact that you're getting up every day and going, I'm excited about what I'm doing today, that's what gets you to the end game. And the money is almost the side benefit of that.
One of the things that I find fascinating is, what do you do after you've cashed out, if you've exited your business? It's a problem that a lot of entrepreneurs experience. Not many go on the Secret Millionaire, which is what you did, the Channel 4 program. You popped up in Real.
Yes.
I understand why you went on Dragon's Den for. I probably don't understand why you went on the Secret Millionaire for.
That was pure. Me and my wife had watched the first however many episodes it was of the first series, and were absolutely enthralled by it, loved it. And then I just got a call saying, would you consider coming on the Secret Millionaire? So I was just like, thought about it for a while, and I thought, what an experience to do something like that.
Who did you help? What was your story?
So there was quite a lot, and there was a number that didn't make it on camera, because it was they were on camera, didn't make the final cut. But there was a woman who helped homeless children in Real, and she had like a B&B, but it ended up just housing homeless kids really. And we got another building equivalent size on the same street so that she could extend what she was doing. And there was a boxing gym where it was donation based, so nobody really paid because they couldn't afford it. And there's a couple of wardens who were going to be redundant, and they were like sort of neighbourhood wardens that were doing the rounds, so paid for them for another year's salary for the two of them. And there was others. There was like a bookshop, a volunteer bookshop that never went on, and there was a young girl called Mel who had a bit of a tough life, and helped her out in different ways.
It's interesting how all these years afterwards, you still remember all the stories, all the people, And that's about paying it forward, though, isn't it? I know there was the element of the TV there. I think it would be fair to say that you had a phase where Young Dragon's Den and The Secret Millionaire. I think now, the last 15 years, you've sort of shied away from that. We're not going to see you on, Dragon's Den or Strictly Come Dancing, are we? Even though you've got your own Wikipedia page.
Yeah. No, I actually got approached about something recently as well, but it's not.
I feel privileged that you're on this podcast, Gavin, quite frankly. We're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about why you decided to go again and your current business, Purple. Welcome back to the Northern Leaders podcast, brought to you by our sponsor, Sancus UK. Now, our guest today is Gavin Wheeldon, CEO of Purple. When you did the deal to sell ALS, you could have gone into the hills. You could have been the inspiration for the film Iron Man, which, of course, was based on Elon Musk. But you had a poor experience with Wi-Fi, and that became the inspiration to set up Purple. Yeah. So just explain what happened.
Well, first of all, I had about, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, and I just got bored senseless. So there was never a future where I wasn't going to be very active. And one of the things with the last business with ALS, traveling all over the world, because we had customers all over the world, is why public Wi-Fi just drove me nuts. It was one of them where I just sit in an airport or wherever and go, who on earth designs this? Why on earth would you do it like this? And simple thing of, you go back somewhere 6 months later and it asks you for a username, email and password. And I'm like, I don't know what I put in 6 months ago. But because you're not connected, you can't do forgot password. Yeah. And it's just like, this is ridiculous. And nobody at the time had thought to put social login on public Wi-Fi. You could get websites, logins all over. And I just thought, well, social login on public Wi-Fi, then I don't have to remember a username and password. And that was the basis of it.
It seems so simple when you say it, but it wasn't being done.
No, it wasn't. Nowhere in the world was it being done, which was staggering.
So you have this 4-week retirement.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you've got all these ideas. I don't know if you got a car or a watch. I doubt it because that's not really your style, really. That's the impression I get. Just spend it on gadgets.
Robotic lawnmowers.
You weren't selling spy holes to residents living where you live. But so you decided pretty quickly, I'm going to go again.
Yeah.
Okay. So you launched Purple. And then you've got this idea for a business. I interviewed Oliver Cookson, who sold My Protein to THG in 2011. And he'd gone back and asked to do other business stuff. And I said, what was the reason for that? This was way back when. He said, you can only get so much sand stuck between your toes. And you realised that you and your missus would probably got divorced if you stayed at home.
Yeah.
So you went again. What was the vision when you started the business? What were you trying to create?
I don't think at that point, because when you've sold something, you've got a bit more luxury of time, I guess, of trying to figure out what it is that you really want to do. The starting point was just, I want to use something to get on public Wi-Fi that I would be happy using. Mm-hmm. And that was just the start. Let's do that and let's see if customers like it and want to pay for it. And then we'll build on it. And I quickly realised that there was all this data coming off Wi-Fi networks that everybody was ignoring, or they were looking at it through an IT lens. And we were able to pull all of that data and basically build Google Analytics for a physical space. So the same things you look at on your website of bounce and conversion, recency, frequency, and all of those things, we can recreate all of those metrics for a physical venue. So it grew into that. It just started off with, let's get people online. And that's still the core of what we do and I'm proud of. But it's all of this analytics. And that's where it sort of grew arms and legs.
That's the clever bit, because providing Wi-Fi is quite easy. I remember interviewing you and I said, well, how do you use that information to make business decisions? And they said, look, just imagine you're coming through, just imagine you're coming through passport control. You're waiting to go through, right, okay. And the first thing you do is you switch your phone on, log onto the Wi-Fi, Purple Wi-Fi. Yeah. And if you're waiting 20 minutes to get through passport control, it's too long. But why is aisle number 3 going through at 5 minutes, while aisle number 6 is going through in 25 minutes? And you said that's just one example of how you can use Wi-Fi to make better decisions. What other examples can you give of where you use Wi-Fi to make better decisions?
Well, things like in a store, if you've got say you've got 10 stores and you're able to measure bounce rates, so how quickly people come in and out of the store. And you realise that there's one store where it's really high bounce, and it's probably caused by the store layout, or that there's too big a queues, or there's something there that people are walking in and going, it's not for me, walking out again. Conversion of passing, so if your store window front, if you've got ones that perform really well, so you can do A/B testing like you do with the page on the website, put 2 different stores on, windows, fronts, and then see which converts better. So, but an simple example of using it is, so McDonald's, which we do in about 7 or 8 countries, we integrate with their loyalty platform, MyMacca. So when you're logging in, we check instantly to see if you're a member or not. And if you aren't, we can sign you up. Just say, do you want to join? Yes. So there's no coming out of it, no follow-up emails or anything. You just join in journey.
Right.
So, but there's so many examples of.
Would you know my purchasing history?
Depends on what it is. So there's certain retailers that we integrate with all of the e-com platform as well, so we can see the cycle of offline purchases versus then we drive them online. So you're trying to drive this offline, online, convergences of the universes.
When I was preparing for this interview, looking back through our conversations we've had before and interviews that I've done before, and there was something I remember but couldn't find any reference to it. And if I've misremembered this, if that's a word, and it was the word purple where the name came from.
Yes.
I've got a feeling that purple was one of your daughter's favourite colours.
Correct.
That's right, because you were thinking about a name, couldn't think of one.
Yeah.
And then
I was sat money? I know exactly. Well, she might do when she grows up, but I remember me and the brother-in-law sat at a bar in Wales on holiday, and I'm chatting to him saying, can I do this? Need a name? And she used to. It was actually So Purple. She got, it's So Purple. Oh, that's So Purple.
Yeah.
And she did it. She was like wandering around nearby. And she went, that's so. She'd have been about 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she said, that's So Purple. And I just went. And sort of looked at him like, that'll do.
Yeah.
So it was originally called So Purple, and then we dropped the So.
I mean, Matillion was, Matthew Scullion was struggling to come up with a name, and his wife said, well, just combine Matthew and Scullion and come up with Matillion, like that. And because nobody else had that name, so you could buy the URL, and you're well away. Okay, so your daughter, fantastic. She's the brains behind the business. We've established that.
Obviously, yes.
How big is Purple now? I mean, how many customers and users have you got?
So we've got about 1,200 customers around the world, and they range.
Lots of airports.
We've got loads of airports. We've got it's everything from a local pub through to Walmart. So we've got stores all over. We've got entire cities. Places like Newcastle and York in the UK, but we've got 30 cities in Australia. We've got about 10 or 15 in the US. We've got stadiums, Miami Heat and New York Nets, and we've got all the Premier Inn hotels and Michael Kors and Wagamamas, and the name goes on.
Impressive names.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got about 80,000 venues live, and like I say, they range from the small to the really large. 440 million users of the Wi-Fi. 440 million.
Wow.
70% of the UK adult population use our Wi-Fi somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether that's in a pub, a restaurant, or because like all the Stonegate pubs are ours, and you won't know you're in them a lot, but they're ours. And the trains and the airports and it's pretty extensive.
And the business model is you provide the Wi-Fi, and then you can provide data that they can make decisions on.
Correct.
It's quite an easy sell as a business. You talking about your early experience when you were, selling like the spy holes, or you were selling the you're selling the windows,
kitchens.
The kitchens. Yeah. You have to convince people that actually this will improve your life.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of cost to you or a lot of risk to you. And that's almost what you learned at the beginning of your career.
It probably is, yeah. Without knowing it, there was a lot of lessons in that.
That's what I find fascinating. Terry Leahy, Sir Terry Leahy, the former CEO of Tesco, came on board along with Bill Curry, actually, as quite an early investor. So he sits around your cap table. He's on your board, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So what's it like? Like, I know you've been successful, but you're sitting around the table with Sir Terry Leahy, who is a massive investor in all things tech. How much has that helped you?
It's helped a lot, and I've been quite surprised and pleasantly surprised when we got Terry on board. I thought, well, if he turns up once a year to a board meeting, but I've got the name, that'll do. But if he's missed one board meeting in 6 years, I'd be surprised.
He stayed with you as well, though.
Yes, he's absolutely still on the board, still really active, still speak to him regularly. But we've got, Gavin Patterson, the ex-CEO of BT, is on the board. Yeah. He was CRO of Salesforce as well. Chris Dedicoat, who was the CRO of Cisco, one biggest technology companies in the world. So you sit around that table, and Bob Willett, who was the CEO of Best Buy International, he was chairman of Marks and Spencer's, he was the managing partner of Accenture. It's a pretty impressive boardroom to sit around.
That's an A-team. Yeah, that really is an A-team. Okay, 2023, you raised £10.5 million from BGF. Yeah. It's interesting. How do you bootstrap the business? Self-funded it until that point?
Money off high net. So Terry, and that was more about bringing people and the skills that they would bring. So you did the deal with BGF in 2023. What's your vision for Purple today? As we sit here today, what's your vision for the business? Global domination in a positive manner for people. We're not going to assimilate the world, but we're actually going to be moving more consumer focused. So we've got an app that's being released in hopefully about a month's time. And what that will do is, if you've got the app, it will securely connect you to 5 million hotspots around the world from the app. So you're no longer on unsecure public Wi-Fi, but you can also crowdsource networks as well. So if I add here today and somebody else comes with the app, it'll join them automatically and securely. So we're going to move to be a bit more consumer focused. And the reason is, again, going back to that original mission about just making it easier to get online. But the benefit is for the venues. We've already got 22 million people signed up onto this system, by the way. So we've 400 whatever million to go. But all of our customers are migrating over. All new customers go onto it. And so as an example right now, if you were to connect at Manchester Airport, which is ours, and then you go onto an Aviva train or McDonald's or Harvey Nicks or something, you need to log on twice and fill in forms. But what this will then do is just say, hey, Chris, do you want to share your data with whoever? So no more signing in, no more messing about, because your account is with us, but you choose individually then who you want to give your data to.
Many years ago, I interviewed Rob Cotton when he was at NCC, and we were talking. He was saying that one of the things about cybersecurity is people go into a cafe shop and they want to get on the Wi-Fi. They don't care who who's providing it. They say yes, and then they could be attacked by cybersecurity terrorists. Yeah. I mean, recently there's been a big spate of retailers have been targeted by cybersecurity as well. Yeah. From your point of view, I mean, this new idea that you're working on at the moment, is it like a VPN? Is it like protecting your browsing history? Or?
It is. It secures the device to the Wi-Fi access point. So at the moment, that bit of the journey is unsecure, and you can get, without getting too techy, like man in the middle attacks and what have you, and it removes all of that risk from you and your devices.
You used to write a column for Business Cloud. I mentioned it. It was Gadget Gavin. One of the great things about you as well is that you'd say, when do you need it by? And you'd say Friday at 12 o'clock. And it'd be Thursday at 6 o'clock. You'd have it, like before, not after. And you were talking about AI. We mentioned it earlier with your previous business that you were probably doing AI before it was AI.
Yeah.
Where do you see AI going?
Oh, I'll tell you, I could talk on that for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
I think
you talk about it for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah. I think there's so much potential for what it can do today, and the world is going to change. It's going to tip on its head over the next couple of years. Things like coding, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, it won't exist anymore. I think design jobs, really, there are so many jobs that will not exist in their current form. And I think right now, people have still got their heads in the sand. I've had it with work, and I'll go, what are you doing with AI? They go, oh, yeah, I'm really busy with AI. I'll go, what? No, tell me what you're doing. Well, I do chat. Like, no, that's not AI. That is very basic.
Yeah.
Where is it in the workflows? Where is it, So it will turn everything on its head. And people that jump on and learn how to ride that wave will do incredibly well. But I think there's a lot of people with their head in the sand not seeing what's coming.
There was in the US, a big tech firm basically said it was no to all recruitment unless unless
Shopify.
AI couldn't do it. Yes, Shopify.
Shopify,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I was trying to think of the name, and it was and it caused a bit of a storm at the time. But then people like there was a VP, a vice president at Cisco, said, "Great idea. We've been talking about it for years." That's almost going to be the default position.
It is.
If AI can't do it, then you hire.
Yeah.
But you think AI can do a lot of those, and they're not even low-skilled roles, are they? They're quite skilled roles.
Well, that's the irony that sort of AI has sort of sprung into areas that it was very unexpected, creative, writing, songwriting, design, coding is logical, but there's an estimate that it can probably do 73% of all jobs and tasks right now, but people don't know how to implement it. So it's going to, it will make, and it's the law of accelerating returns. Every 3 months, it's just jumping forward.
We've looked at a business cloud and we thought, are there certain roles that you can use AI to make your job easier? So if you're trying to bring 2 reports together, but AI is quite literal. So, a company says we're 9 years old. It works back 9 years, but actually it might be 9 years and a month. So you get the date wrong. But it's getting better all the time. When you wake up in the morning, right, and I don't know if you're a morning person.
I am.
I'd imagine you are.
Morning and night.
Morning and night, yeah, okay. So when you wake up in the morning at 5:30 and you go for your run or whatever it is, you still love what you do.
Yes.
I mean, I we're talking now, it's like there's no difference to when you first founded that first business. In fact, I would imagine when you had that business when you were aged 11, what motivates you?
I think solving problems is probably at the core of it. If you see a problem, an irritation like I did with Wi-Fi, my mind will just go over and over, chew over and over and over and over it until you find a solution to that problem. I often, my mind will often go to tech because I'm a techie. It isn't always, so, other business problems around sales performance and, training and coaching, there's other ways, but yeah, I will often turn to tech. So yeah, my mind is just like non-stop going over all of these things and how you can build workflows and customize models and put guardrails in and things like that to get it to, particularly on the AI front, how you get it to do the right things.
And you always seem to be, you've got quite a strategic mind there. If there was an air bubble coming from my head right now, it would be like the video printer, wouldn't it? It would be constantly like doing stuff.
Ticker, yeah.
Do you sleep okay? Or does your mind is your mind racing when you go to bed or when you wake up first thing in the morning?
No, I'd sleep straight through, but I'd probably go to bed about 12:30 and up at 6:30. So I sleep about 6 hours, which I think is reasonable. I know there are other people that wouldn't get that much, but when I'm in my bed, then I'm gone.
That's it. Right. Okay. This is the Northern Leader podcast. There's 2 questions we finish with. The first one is, what leaders do you most admire?
Do you know, when I went to the dinner, I probably thought it was more its business leaders, and I'd have probably picked from different ones. But I think Andy Burnham, I've been incredibly impressed with in many ways, and I probably don't sit on that side of the political fence, but I think what he's done and other mayors in the area for the North, I think has been really incredible. And sort of watching him speak on that at that dinner, I think, that's a leader. That's somebody who's inspiring people to follow and with a purpose, not because they are being paid to or have to.
I would agree with that because I'm probably of a similar persuasion to you. That particular day, in that particular evening at the Northern Leaders Awards dinner back in January, he just spoke for 8.5 minutes. He said to me, how long do you want me to speak? And I said, 8.5 minutes or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it was like, yes, he's done that all his career.
Yeah.
But I always think the best prime minister we never got because people didn't see that side of him. But in the North, everybody loves Andy Burnham, who incidentally is on the Northern Leaders list as well.
Yes, correct.
Final question. I'm glad it was correct. Final question is that many, many, many years from now, you've got a big birthday coming up next year. So
Indeed.
Another 50 years from now or beyond, the way technology is going, what would you want your epitaph to be?
I would left the world in a better place than it started when I entered it.
Yeah, I think that's great, because it's just, that's almost how I feel as well. And I think if everybody thought they want to leave the world a better place than the one that they entered it, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
Have you thought about a job in politics?
Oh, no, that would be divorce. 100%. It would be divorce.
Listen, massive thanks to you, Gavin. Really enjoyed speaking to you. We're now going to go for a quick break and then we'll be back with our assessment of that interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Business Cloud provides tech insight with bite. To get the best business tech news straight into your inbox, just subscribe to our free newsletter. Details on our website. So Gavin Wheeldon has left the room, and knowing Gavin, he's probably left the building as well. How do I reflect on that interview? Well, the great thing about speaking to people like Gavin Wheeldon is you think you know most things about them and they tell you something you don't know. So the fact that his middle name is Lloyd, and that was because his parents stopped at a Lloyds Bank when they were going to the christening, is gold dust for me. I love that. And that sort of thing I will remind him of. One of the fascinating things about Gavin is he's been hugely successful in his life. I didn't know about the ADHD diagnosis late in life, but I'm not surprised. I think he sees that as his secret sauce, if you like. But as we exited the room and he went out, he got the Wi-Fi of this building so that he could add it to his app, so that when the app comes out, he's got another venue. And this is a guy who's got like hundreds and hundreds of millions of users using venues all over the world. That's the level of detail that makes him successful as well. He's a really nice guy. You won't find many people who say anything negative about Gavin Wheeldon. And he's a very, very, very worthy name on our Northern Leaders list. That brings us to the end of this episode of Northern Leaders, which was brought to you in association with Sancus UK, which is a real estate lender based in Manchester. Thank you very much to them and to Andrew Charnley in particular. Thank you to What Media for producing this episode of the Northern Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a 5-star rating. If you've not enjoyed it, but you know me and you like me, give it a 5-star rating. No, honestly, please tell your friends and family. We are passionate about the UK, but we're passionate about the North, and we're passionate about celebrating the lives of some of the people who make the North a better place. Thank you very much. My name is Chris McGuire.